Meeting of the Community Development Board is called to order on May 10th, 2023. Welcome, everyone. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I am John Quattrocchi, and I will ask the other members and the staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Bruce Rector.
Diane Achinelli.
Ray Hodreport.
Jay Daniel, attorney for the board.
Nicole Sprague, City Clerk.
Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development.
Matt Minnich, Assistant City Attorney.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development.
Andrew Hupp. Andy Park.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so that they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all of the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us, clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Now I will ask all those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk. Anybody? I don't know if we have.
I don't think we really need to be sworn in today.
Okay. Do we need to go into agendas? Do we need to do last month's meetings? Minutes?
Did you have the minutes for you?
No, then we don't.
You have no minutes. I would just move right on to your director's item.
We're going right on to the director's items. You have the floor.
Great. Well, thank you all for making time to attend this special meeting today. We are happy to bring you our draft, couple of chapters for our comprehensive plan and what we'd like to do. Today is work with you in your capacity as the local planning agency, which we don't really do a whole lot of. So this will be a good discussion, hopefully, today, where you can provide some input on the policy direction that's being proposed in the update of the comprehensive plan. So we will tackle 2 chapters this meeting and then the remainder at your meeting next week. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Lopko, our long-range planning manager, to get started.
Good afternoon, Jamie Lopko from Planning and Development. We're here today to provide you both an update on the rewrite of the comprehensive plan, but also to get your input on our first 2 chapters. So we're going to begin talking about what is a comprehensive plan. Then we're going to look at what kind of changes we're making to the plan, the public engagement that's got us to this point, and then we'll get into the first 2 chapters, which is quality places and mobility. And then we're going to close with next steps and an opportunity for questions and comments from the board. It's a lot of information. I'll pause frequently in case there's questions intermittently. If not, feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question. So comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document that guides decisions on the future growth and sustainability of the city. The City of Clearwater has adopted comprehensive plans to guide growth and preservation of natural resources long before the state's growth management statutes, which began in 1986. Oh dear, that's not good. Great. I'll keep going. Over time, laws and the vision and direction of the city has changed, signifying a need for amendments and updates to the comprehensive plan. Major updates to the plan typically occur every 7 to 10 years. The current comprehensive plan for the city was written in 2008, and we've done minor amendments since then, since its adoption. And at this time, we're performing a complete rewrite of the comprehensive plan, including reformatting the document to make it easier to use. Start back up yet? Gotta love technology.
Don't mess with it.
Work. So the current plan is based on 11 elements, and those were required by state law. But there's been changes in state law that have allowed us to reformat the document to make it a little more user-friendly and easier to follow. It is less less prescriptive. Right now, there's a lot of statements say the city shall do this, the city must do this. And for a policy document, we'd really rather it be action-oriented, that we want to research things or consider things or evaluate things. And so the document's been rewritten to be more action-oriented. And also, there was a lot of repetition. Because there were requirements set out by the state of a certain number of elements that we had to have, a lot of the elements overlapped in what they covered, so there's a lot of repetition causing for a longer document. So we've gone through great lengths to try and create smaller chapters, giving us an easier opportunity to find things, make it more user-friendly for the board, for city council, for staff, and the public.
Your email was up.
Yes. All right, so we will roll right into public engagement. All right, so our process for rewriting the comp plan began back in 2020 with a detailed review of our current plan that led into public engagement. So with assistance, we had a consultant, HDR. They worked with us to engage the community to identify current community assets and concerns, share thoughts on opportunities for improvement, and discuss priorities for the future. So the public engagement involved over 300 participants in the items that were listed on the slide. And so staff used the engagement to develop a vision that is listed on the slide, and also common themes were heard during this engagement. And some of those were promoting cultural, social, and artistic vibrancy of the city, bringing new life to downtown, transportation concerns for safety, connectivity, and public transit, and balancing city policy emphasis between all areas of the city, not just focusing on downtown and Clearwater Beach. And so these themes were used as a guide in developing the new comprehensive plan, Clearwater 2045. All right, so before we get into the two chapters, I want to let you know a couple of things. First, the plan's formatted into goals, objectives, and policies in each chapter. And I'll cover the goals and their associated objectives and policies as they've been drafted. We use the current plan as a guide, so a lot of what was in the current plan has been carried over, whether it be verbatim or we've updated it to meet current needs. But we've also added some new items, and I'll try to point those out as we get to those. Second, it is a draft document, so again, we welcome your input, comments, and questions. It's likely going to change in format and the order, and possibly some content based on what we hear from the board and city council. Lastly, there's also going to be what we call a plan implementation section at the end of this document. And so that's going to cover goals, objectives, and policies related to annexation, but also anything related to intergovernmental coordination. So like in mobility, we would work with PSDA or Pinellas County on things. Those things you won't see in this chapter because they will be covered in plan implementation. So I just want to let you know that ahead of time. If you're looking for something like that, that will be covered in a later section. All right, so let's get started with Quality Places. Quality Places provides guidance for city leaders, staff, and the public related to land use, development, and redevelopment, place character and preservation, neighborhood stability, housing affordability, and economic development. The chapter contains goals, objectives, and policies that came from our existing future land use and housing elements. The goals, objectives, and policies will be identified by the initials of the chapter they come from and a numerical value. So for Quality Places, they'll begin with QP, and in mobility, they'll begin with an M. It's getting a better way to try and track things instead of saying goal 1.1. We know that it came from Quality Places, so we had a new numbering system. So goal QP1 covers our land use and development in the city. This is one of our larger goals with 10 objectives covering a wide range of topics that are listed on the slide. Most of the topics are brought over from the current plan. However, there are 3 new objectives related to tree protection, tree canopy, and economic opportunity. So our QP 1.1 states development within the city should be guided by the future land use map and its categories. And policies include establishing the density and intensity standards for the city and ensuring the city has an adequate number of future land use categories. It's also allowing for floating solar facilities and stormwater ponds and drainage features, and considering creating standards for neighborhood serving commercial development. Our 1.2 is for proposed amendments to our future land use map to be reviewed and evaluated to ensure they're consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, the community development code, as well as the countywide plan. So policies on this include limiting amendments that would create spot zoning, directing higher density and intensity uses to our multimodal and transit corridors, ensuring we have adequate public facilities to support increases in density and intensity, ensuring requests and intensities are compatible with our surrounding neighborhoods, maintaining consistency of our map with the countywide map, and comparing those two to identify where our inconsistencies are and try to address those, review amendments to our Clearwater Air Park, near our Clearwater Air Park for consistency with our airport master plan, and denying amendments that would increase density or intensity in our coastal storm area unless the specific requirements are met. 1.2 covers infill development and redevelopment being compatible with the surrounding environment. This includes encouraging redevelopment and infill development that's of economically underutilized areas, facilitating productive reuse of abandoned or underutilized properties or buildings, continuing transfer of development rights consistent with our code, continuing use of development agreements for redevelopment that's compatible with surrounding neighborhoods, and requiring transitions between our higher density intensity areas to our surrounding residential neighborhoods.
Can you advance this?
I'm sorry?
Can you advance this slide?
It's all on this slide. This is all under the
This
objectives.
one? Okay.
We haven't got to goal number 2 yet. Right. That's okay. 1.4 is our signage. This is one that is carried over from our current code, and we're going to leave that in there as is to help us implement the city sign code. And our policies under this include restricting commercial signs that discourage visual clutter and prohibiting billboards in certain areas. 1.5 states that development should meet landscaping and tree protection standards. And this is a newer one. We wanted to include this to protect trees during construction. We want to site development to reduce impact to trees. We want to continue to pursue our Tree City USA designation. We want to promote the use of native plants and xeriscaping. Research possible amendments to our code for arboricultural or horticultural standards. Enhance landscaping standards for our scenic corridors, and maintain and enhance landscape medians throughout the city. 1.6 is about sustaining a tree canopy. This is a newer one as well, that we want to preserve a shade tree canopy on private property by limiting removal or ensuring replacement of shade trees. We want to support the retention of tree canopies over our public rights-of-way. And from our Green 2.0, we want to survey the city's tree canopy and set a goal to increase that canopy coverage. 1.7 is a requirement for hospitals and our institutional future land use. This again is pulled over from our current plan as is, and this is required by Forward Pinellas. It includes hospital uses must have an approved site plan or master plan, and what that master plan and site plan must include, and sets provisions for hospital uses that are contiguous to or near a municipal boundary. 1.8 is compliance with the code being maintained by our building and code enforcement activities. So with that, we want to provide education on our city standards. We want to make sure people understand what we're out there trying to enforce. We want to enforce the city standards through our code enforcement. We want to administer our Florida building code and permitting in a fair and equitable manner. And we want to administer our minimum housing and unsafe structures code. 1.9 is supporting economic opportunity, existing industries, and the creation of jobs and training opportunities. Under this, we're looking to establish an economic development plan, encourage businesses to work with our economic development and housing department to find incentives or possible locations in the city. Look at the formation and growth of small businesses. Evaluate city-owned properties for economic opportunities before declaring them surplus. Support tourism opportunities in the city. Create programs and policies to reduce employment disparities. Partnering with our area colleges to promote business-related degrees. And promote and support workforce training grant programs. And lastly, 1.10 is our American with Disabilities Act standards should be met on all city-owned properties during development, redevelopment, and renovations. Under this, we want to make sure that we're implementing our ADA guide to reduce non-compliant structures, public buildings, excuse me, ensuring our public buildings are ADA compliant, and incorporate those into renovations, and also improve city facilities to ensure necessary needs are provided to the community. So this is our future land use map. This was just put in here as a visual for you to help you understand. This is one of the new maps we're putting in there to make them a lot more visually pleasing for people and easier to read in the plan. The Goal number 2, this is our property rights goal and objectives. It's statutorily required, and it's being carried over from the current plan as is. Goal number 3 covers the protection and enhancement of the Courtney Campbell and Memorial Causeways, as well as city gateways and scenic corridors. So 3.1 is the city preserving the aesthetic and character of the Courtney Campbell Memorial Causeways. Policies was that are maintaining our scenic views offered by the Courtney Campbell Causeway and the iconic native Florida landscaping of Memorial Causeway. Supporting the Florida Scenic Highway designation of Courtney Campbell Causeway and retaining the physical character of the Courtney Campbell Causeway similar to its historic origin. Promoting education and partnerships to preserve the natural and recreational features of the causeways and continuing litter cleanup programs along those causeways. 3.2 is the city should maintain and preserve unique water views as gateways along identified corridors with a policy to consider developing corridor beautification projects. 3.3 is the city should preserve view corridors that provide a clear view of the water from the abutting street. These are ensuring view corridors are not negatively impacted during site plan review process or other land use decisions, and preserving public access to right-of-way ends that are protected by the city charter. Goal 4 covers our art, cultural, and historic preservation initiatives. Excuse me. 4.1 is the city should contribute and expand the visual appeal and identity of the city through the Cultural Arts Strategic Plan. So policies include creating art projects and programs to shape the city's image, strengthen civic connectivity, and support our neighborhood identity, like our storm drainage program or our signal box program. Exploring a sister cities or an artist in residence program, designated downtown as an arts district, expanding arts programming to neighborhood parks, libraries, and recreation centers, and continuing to implement the 2002 Clearwater Cultural Plan. 4.2 is the city should preserve the authenticity of the built environment and celebrate historic places. Under this, we'll look at reviewing and updating the historic preservation provisions in our code, encouraging historic overlay districts that protect historic properties, housing, and neighborhoods, consulting with the state and other historic organizations when development could occur on historic or archaeologically significant lands, identifying local historic preservation opportunities, increasing public awareness of the city's history and benefits of historic preservation, and working with our Harbor Oaks Neighborhood Association to determine if there's interest in pursuing a local historic district. Number 5 is the development of housing options to diversify housing to meet the needs of the evolving needs of Clearwater. So 5.1 covers our housing affordability initiatives. This is, again, another large objective that will have 13 policies. And they will cover things like maintaining sufficient acreage of residentially zoned properties with varying densities and locations. Continue to provide our density bonuses for affordable housing. Consider establishing missing middle and senior housing density bonuses and standards. Consider amending our code to enable greater housing diversity to allow things like accessory dwelling units or missing middle housing. Providing additional and diverse housing options integrated into neighborhoods, like allowing our accessory dwelling units in all our zoning districts and not having those count against your density. Reviewing our code to determine if there are barriers that will slow delivery of housing development. Support the Clearwater Housing Authority's programs for affordable housing opportunities. Provide information, incentives, and assistance to promote housing for very low to moderate income households. Encourage affordable mixed-use housing close to employment centers, transit stops, parks, and commercial centers. Identify surplus city-owned lands for the potential of housing development. Identify other publicly owned lands that may be suitable for housing development and partner with those property owners for potential development. And develop standards to allow affordable housing to be built on any parcel zoned for commercial or industrial use per state law. All right, so 5.2, where we get into developing policies and strategies to address housing disinvestment and displacement. So we want to look at identifying residential areas that are at risk for disinvestment, demolition, or redevelopment, and prepare programs to preserve or replace them. We want to create or expand programs to minimize displacement from loss of rental units due to demolition or conversion. We want to track neighborhood change, development, and housing costs to identify areas experiences or likely to experience displacement pressures. We want to encourage renovation, rehabilitation, or removal and replacement of substandard housing. We want to look at options to provide temporary relocation or counseling to enable rehabilitation of substandard housing. And we want to look at requiring owners of mobile home sites to ensure that adequate mobile home sites or other suitable sites exist for relocation of mobile homeowners prior to city action that will result in the removal or relocation of those mobile homeowners. 5.3 is our strengthening our outreach, our partnership, our funding, and capacity to deliver workforce housing and affordable housing. This includes expanding city outreach to low-income and housing insecure neighborhoods, partnering with public and private entities to explore funding and other financial tools to support workforce and affordable housing, supporting the creation of workforce and affordable housing and mixed-use developments along corridors identified in the 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. Continuing to meet with the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Board and Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to help facilitate construction of affordable housing. Promote efforts to strengthen the capacity of existing and new not-for-profit entities that could potentially own, manage, or construct workforce housing or affordable housing. And continue to provide assistance to qualified residents to retrofit their housing to be accessible to households with special needs. 5.4 is regulation of related to group homes, foster care facilities, and special needs housing, subject to state requirements. Now, these policies are being carried over from the current plan, and we are currently working with outside counsel on fair housing and sober homes, so we will hold off on making any changes to this objective and policies until we've completed that work. 5.5 is the city should encourage conservation, rehabilitation, and preservation of existing housing stock through public and private resources. This should include using all available funding options for housing construction, rehabilitation, and preservation, involving our private lending institutions and development programs to encourage investment in affordable housing. Promoting economic development, encouraging our private lending institutions to be more responsive to household income needs of our very low and moderate income households. And using a collaborative code enforcement response for housing to provide residents with information on rehabilitation assistance and also additional time to bring their structures into compliance. Okay, so the city's current comprehensive plan has a design hierarchy in it. It was the first step in protecting unique areas of the city. So the framework contained in the new plan builds upon that initial hierarchy and will allow city council and others to focus on areas with certain design characteristics. So this framework map was created as part of our preliminary framework plan, and that was presented to the Community Development Board back in October of 2022. So as part of this map, we have neighborhoods, which are the foundation and building blocks of the city that offer a wide range of housing and lifestyle options to meet the needs of our residents. Our neighborhood centers are small-scale neighborhoods serving commercial nodes, and corridors are the main commercial corridors through the city. These are the hubs for shopping, dining, and services that serve the daily and weekly needs of our nearby neighborhoods. Mixed-use centers, those are primarily located along US 19, and there is one in the area of the Morton Plant Hospital on Fort Harrison Avenue. And those are important centers for living, working, and shopping. The centers bring new life and opportunity to formerly underutilized and mostly auto-oriented places. Our activity centers are downtown Clearwater and Clearwater Beach, and they are the city's traditional centers of living, working, shopping, and entertainment. They are dense, walkable areas that serve as the city's primary economic engine. And lastly, the Hercules Employment District, which is located north and east of the Air Park. It's the city's traditional center for smaller scale manufacturing, assembly, repairs, and other makers enterprises. While there's only currently one employment district, which is Hercules, there is a new study that will allow the city to create others if desired. And so our next 4 goals will build off of this framework map. So goal 6 covers the activity centers of downtown Clearwater and Clearwater Beach. 6.1 is the city should continue to protect and enhance waterfront uses that promote tourism and recreation. So this includes investing in downtown and Clearwater Beach marinas to provide safe and efficient access to them, encouraging preservation of our recreational and commercial working waterfronts, marinas, and other water-dependent facilities, and discouraging land use and zoning changes of recreational and commercial working waterfronts. 6.2 is the city should promote reinvestment and revitalization of downtown through the implementation of our Clearwater Downtown Redevelopment Plan and the application of the Downtown District and Development Standards. So as part of this, our policies will include reviewing and amending that redevelopment plan as well as those district standards to guide redevelopment and public investment. We want to continue our tax increment financing program and redevelopment efforts in downtown through our community redevelopment agency. We want to activate our streets and streetscapes to support our local businesses through various CRA projects and programs. Encourage the continued presence of our public uses in downtown. Encourage increased residential development to create a larger and more stable population base. Continue to utilize the public amenities incentive pool to incentivize development and explore integrating parking management and pricing strategies. And 6.3 is our Beach by Design, a preliminary design for Clearwater Beach and design guidelines, commonly referred to as Beach by Design. And this is to guide development, redevelopment, and placemaking on Clearwater Beach. And so our policies with this are, again, reviewing and amending Beach by Design to guide redevelopment and public investment and identify the area governed by Beach by Design. Also, we want to continue using the destination resort pool of additional hotel rooms in permitted areas, using our hotel density reserve allocation of hotel units to facilitate hotel development, and continuing to track the allocation of those units from both the destination resort density pool and the hotel density reserve. Okay, number 7 goes into our corridors and our mixed use and neighborhood centers. So 7.1 is to identify areas appropriate for and support redevelopment and infill development within a corridor or mixed use or neighborhood center. Policies in here include identifying, prioritizing corridors identified as investment corridors on the 2045 long-range transportation plan, and supporting adoption and utilization of future land use categories in the countywide plan to promote infill and redevelopment along those investment corridors. We want to advocate for mixed-use development that includes a combination of compatible uses, attractive neighborhoods, and the use of transit. Promote high-quality design and corridor planning to identify opportunities for conservation, redevelopment, and reinvestment along existing corridors. And we will look at establishing a neighborhood Main Street program. We also want to inventory our vacant land, identify target areas for mixed-use development options. 7.2 goes into our US 19 corridor. We have the US 19 redevelopment plan and also the US 19 district and development standards. So policies with this are we want to ensure that the provisions of the US 19 district encourage transit supportive and walkable forms of development. And upon annexation of property along the US 19 corridor, we want to make sure that it's designated with an appropriate future land use consistent with our 3 categories of US 19 Regional Center, US 19 Neighborhood Center, or US 19 Corridor. And we also want to continue to market preferred sites within the US 19 corridor. And 7.3 goes into preserving the existing and planned character and development in neighborhood centers and corridors. In this, we want to utilize the countywide plan's scenic and non-commercial corridor designation to limit amendments to incompatible future land use designations. We also want to limit expansion of existing commercial uses on Belcher Road intersections with Sunset Point and Nursery Roads. We want to preserve limited large lot residential character of neighborhoods designated residential estate and residential suburban. We want to look at amendments to our code to establish minimum lot sizes, larger setbacks, and development techniques like cluster development for zoning districts consistent with our residential estate and residential suburban future land use categories. We also want to preserve the residential character of a scenic non-commercial corridor of Belcher Road north of Sunset and south of Druid. We want to support the continued residential and institutional character of Nursery Road between Belcher and US 19. We want to preserve the golf course community character of Countryside neighborhood. And we want to preserve scenic water views and residential character of North Clearwater Beach, Sand Key, Island Estates, and Old Bay. Goal number 8 is a new goal that covers industrial lands and uses in our Hercules Employment District and also areas that are identified in the Target Employment and Industrial Land Survey, or TEALS, that was done by Forward Pinellas. So 8.1 states that we need to update our comprehensive plan to be consistent with the countywide rules based on the accepted TEALS. That's currently going through the process of being approved by the Forward Pinellas, and once that's approved, we will be able to look at possible amendments to the comprehensive plan. So policies under this will include mapping a target employment center overlays and establishing standards to protect and preserve these areas, and also supporting investments in infrastructure, mixed use, and employment-intensive uses. 8.2 is the city should establish policies and programs ensuring continued viability of our small-scale manufacturing, assembly, and related uses. And this includes limiting retail and office development except for smaller-scale supportive uses that directly serve the primary light industrial functions. but also ensuring that we have adequate buffering and transitions between our light industrial uses to minimize off-site impacts to surrounding neighborhoods. And the last goal of Quality Places is a new goal covering sustaining and improving our neighborhoods. So 9.1 states the city needs to ensure programs and investments are designed to support the long-term livability, sustainability, attractiveness, and safety of our existing neighborhoods. Under this, our policies will look at creating a neighborhood planning program to identify opportunities for conservation, redevelopment, and reinvestments, looking at expansion of existing neighborhood-focused programs, services, and initiatives, involving our private lending institutions in planning and development programs for small business economic development loans in our very low to moderate income neighborhoods, incorporating public health and safety considerations in neighborhood planning, prioritizing neighborhood planning and placemaking to support stabilization and revitalization of our older and under-resourced neighborhoods, developing and tracking measures of neighborhood stability to identify places at risk of displacement and decline in quality of life. And we want to work with our neighborhoods to target code enforcement on our housing assistance activities. 9.2 gets into guiding development and public investment in our neighborhoods to conserve the character and promote conservation, infill and redevelopment, and public realm improvements. We want to evaluate our standards in our code to promote compact and walkable forms of mixed-use housing, encourage neighborhood services and amenities in locations planned for increased housing density. Consider land use and zoning amendments along Lakeview Road from South Forest Harrison to South Martin Luther King Avenue that support the emerging character of the area and Morton Plant Hospital. Consider land use and zoning amendments to promote affordable and mixed income housing, as well as mixed-use development along South Fort Harrison from A Street to E Street to support the emerging character of Morton Plant Hospital. We want to protect the established character of our South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue from Lakeview to Woodlawn Street by limiting land use and zoning amendments to key locations that support commercial uses. We want to encourage lot consolidation, streetscape improvements, and creation of affordable housing and mixed-use development along Missouri Avenue from Drew Street to Bel Air Road. And we want to encourage livable neighborhoods on Drew Street from Myrtle Avenue to Old Coachman Road. And 9.3 states the city should support the vision of the North Greenwood area through implementation of the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area Plan. This is moving forward to the county on May 23rd and should be adopted at that point. So policies under this include support of our tax increment financing programming and redevelopment efforts through our Community Redevelopment Agency, reviewing and updating the CRA plan periodically to ensure our goals and strategies are being met, working to retain the existing neighborhood character and evaluating the creation of a form-based standards or amendments to our code, utilizing the findings of our North Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue design charrette to determine if amendments to our code are needed to facilitate redevelopment along that corridor, and updating the CRA plan by 2033. And so that is all of the Quality Places chapter. And so I will pause there so we can digest that and see if there's any questions, comments, concerns on that piece.
Sounds good.
It's a lot of information.
I just have a question on the land use map, or future land use map, that shows the changes, right, from existing? Is
Not
that
necessarily
correct?
changes. That's the existing land use versus future land use are two different things. Existing land use is what is actually on the property right now.
Right.
Future land use is what we use to guide the growth management.
The growth.
So if it could have a single-family house on it, but have a future land use of commercial, just because that's the way it's been programmed. And so that's one of our nonconformities that we look for and possibly address.
Okay.
I have a question. You had mentioned having like walkable neighborhoods or walkable areas along US 19. Does that gonna have to cause like construction of walkovers or whatever, similar to what's on McMullen Booth with the parks and, the East-West Trail to cross McMullen Booth? You can go up and over, because 19 is not the friendliest road.
Yeah, I don't know that 19 was identified as that. It's the mixed-use centers. We're looking at the neighborhood centers and the corridors for walkable areas. 19 is more looked at as an auto-oriented place, so we're looking at cross-access between parcels to make sure there's connectivity for vehicles, try and keep people from getting back on 19 if possible.
In expanding, you were talking about making more affordable housing in this expansion. Is there going to be, if I buy a piece of land or whatever and I put up an apartment building, are there going to be stricter criteria or something in there that states that they have to provide 50% based on a sliding scale of affordable housing? Is it going to drill down that far?
Not at this point. We don't have an inclusionary zoning, so we cannot require affordable housing, but there are provisions from state code that will have some restrictive things on there about the amount of affordable housing at certain income levels if you want to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm just asking because they're putting up a ton of them on 19 right now. By Sunset Point Road there, they bought out all those mobile home parks up there. And the medium rent up there for a 2-bedroom is well over $2,000. I mean, and that's the cheapest, and it's ridiculous right now.
So and just to piggyback on that, it's a good point, but aren't there incentives for developers to make a proportional part of that affordable housing? So if they're building 400 units and they were to do 10% of it affordable housing for that particular area, aren't there some development incentives in place already for that?
We do have a density bonus.
We have an affordable housing bonus, and if you're in the downtown, we also have a bonus that we can build.
Is it sufficient enough that the developer will take advantage of it?
We've had multiple projects that have been approved that had the affordable housing bonus, so it's definitely helped developers. And in downtown, there's a lot more flexibility, so we have a project right now that's in the site plan review process that I don't think they're availing themselves because they didn't need to, and they had plenty of density and intensity. We had another one approved that came to the board that used the public amenities incentive pool, but they also didn't require very much. So I think it just really depends on, which area of the city you're located in. But we haven't had complaints that, it's not enough. But Denise is here, and if she wants to weigh in, she can, but we've approved quite a few of the bonuses.
I'm just asking, because a lot of the workers that work in the area, that's their biggest complaint. They can't afford the housing.
Right.
Well, the industrial component that you haven't brought forward yet dovetails into the workforce housing and bonuses, right, that you guys are going to present later, that the state passed for residential on industrial use?
I don't know that that's going to require any changes to our code. It's just something if somebody were to propose a affordable housing development within a commercial or industrial zone, we couldn't prohibit it. We would have to process it.
Right. That's your 5.19 or whatever that's in here, Objective 5.
Right.
So it's a use that was not in industrial before, and now it is. So we can...
Right, and it's not showing up on your grid that it's an allowable use.
Right.
What in the table, Andrew?
On the tables for industrial, it says NA for industrial general. And then under
Okay.
IL, it's just over OV instead of density units. But there's a workforce housing increase in density. I know St. Pete just allowed the 20-acre piece to become that use under that state mandated density, and they got a higher density because of workforce housing, and I think they got some incentives with that as well. On Tyrone.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing Director. I'm not familiar with that particular project, but there are numerous challenges with affordable and workforce housing, and most of those challenges, aside from subsidies and most of the jurisdictions There are 5 jurisdictions within Pinellas County, inclusive of the county, St. Pete, Largo, Pinellas Park, City of Clearwater, that can provide direct subsidy because we get allocations from Fed and state to do so. And the biggest challenge with rental, affordable, and workforce housing is that you have monitoring requirements over the affordability period. And so unless you're a developer who is in that space, it's not terribly attractive for them to commit to 15 to 30 years of monitoring requirements to ensure that the tenants availing themselves of those affordable units, in fact, meet those income qualifications. That can sometimes be a barrier. The industry is catching up, meaning that consultants who will do those monitorings are pursuing those developers to try to encourage that. So it's just a weird time in that universe of affordable and workforce housing. The biggest challenge for us in incentivizing workforce housing, and when I refer to workforce housing, that's 80 to 120% of area median income. There are 2 significant challenges. One, there is only one statewide funding source that supports the development of workforce housing. Our federal sources are limited to the under 80%. The state funding to support workforce housing, referring to the funding that we receive, that we can control, has very specific limitations as to how much of that funding can go to workforce housing. We have 6 buckets to fill, only one of which is workforce housing with that state fund. So we're limited in terms of the funding that we can provide. Additionally, although the Live Local Act, we're still doing some staff analysis on that. Additionally, the way the property appraiser looks at affordable versus workforce housing is very different. So under state law that was in place until March 29th, affordable housing was looked at from the property appraiser's perspective based on income stream, the rent rates. For workforce housing, it's the construction value like any other residential development. So property taxes were very, very high for workforce housing and moderately so for affordable. So when you're looking at the capital stack and operating costs, there are very significant barriers for workforce housing that the legislature tried to address this last session. Again, we're still doing some staff analysis on what that will actually mean in terms of production. And then finally, when we think of affordable and workforce housing, there is certainly a supply-demand imbalance, and it's catching up. I think we're already seeing some softening, albeit that $2,000 rent rate that you've just mentioned, I would not suggest is a softened rate, but we are seeing some evidence that there's some climbing vacancies because production has skyrocketed throughout the Tampa Bay region. So I think some natural relief is coming. The bigger challenge for us is the entire universe of what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, mobile home parks being the primary provider of NOAA, if you will. Those are being consumed, as we've seen, for other forms of development. So preservation or the opportunity to replace that which cannot be preserved with like or available affordable housing is a challenge, some of which is certainly being addressed in this plan that's being presented today. I know that was a lot, sorry, I love that universe. Any questions I can answer regarding workforce or affordable while I'm here? I've stunned you all with my brilliance. Thank you so much.
I just had one other question. As far as bringing investors in and investors coming into this area and into Clearwater to develop all this, are there going to be any kind of criteria to try to keep the investors local as opposed to investors coming from Idaho and are gonna build this and then disappear? Just so that they have more of an interest in what they're doing, more of a hands-on. Is that something that's considered in this, that they get preferential?
Not at this point, but it is something that we can look into to see if we want to include that.
Okay.
That'd be tough. I think you're gonna have some discrimination suits or
Right.
something like that. I don't know how you would implement that.
Right.
I mean, sounds, yeah. Anybody can chime in at any time, obviously. And I was just going to piggyback on the comments that you were talking about with the mobile home parks. There's that 5.22. I mean, some of the stuff sounds good, but I'm also just curious how it's implemented, or is it just, we have a requirement for property owners of mobile home sites to ensure adequate mobile home sites or suitable sites. Is it or suitable sites that would be available, which would be affordable housing and apartments or something of that? Because obviously, there's no new mobile home parks coming up that I know of in the city of Clearwater or even Pinellas County, per se, that you would have adequate, suitable, of like kind. So, I mean, is it something that's just in there? I don't know how we implement that, or is it just that, okay, mobile home guy, somebody buys the property and they just wait for the people to move out and then they come back in for the rezoning?
Yeah.
That's what happens, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
So, I mean, it's
a-
fine, it's all, I just wanted to,
I mean, that's to get around the
yeah.
Yeah.
requirements.
And it depends on who owns the land,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether resident-owned or management firm-owned.
Okay. And if you could, on 5.1.12, you have provision, additional diverse housing options integrated into existing neighborhoods. Can you just give me an example of what that means, other than mother-in-law suites or something like that, or is that what it is, or?
That's really the intent, is similar to a mother-in-law suite, accessory dwelling units is really what we're targeting there, but also allowing them to not count toward density, but also limiting them to not be used as short-term rental as well.
And this is something going backwards. I'm jumping back to objective 1.55. You have in here, it says to maintain and enhance existing landscape medians throughout the city. Obviously, our causeways and such, I mean, are we talking to have all public medians enhanced throughout the city? I mean, I know that we have areas that have obviously reclaimed water already put in, but they're not even on. So I don't know if that, but then you get into maintenance of these areas too, which is an ongoing cost on stuff like that. But, I mean, to do the initial outlay, to plant trees, to do irrigation systems, to put them in, but when you do all that, now we got, and I don't know where that is now, it used to be under Parks and Recreation or something was maintaining a lot of this, and I don't know if that's now on the Public Works, and not that that's for this discussion, but.
Currently, the reclaim system is kind of under stress right now because they're short of water, so they're probably turning things off.
Are we short of water? I thought we had a surplus.
The drought has not been good for us.
I'm not sure.
We got a
Yeah.
notice, that's what I'm asking,
Yeah,
saying,
but-
we got a notice in our building that they were gonna,
Really? On the reclaim?
Don, I would just point out the policy focuses on existing.
Yeah.
Talking about
Okay. Thank you.
I just had a question. I've been able to attend several of the public forums, and I think it's really, really important. I appreciate the way that staff has reached out to the community and invited the community to participate. Some of these sessions have been very well attended, but at least, we're involving the public, which I think is incredibly important. So I've heard some of the comments at those sessions, and I know you've gotten feedback through the website and some other things. So I'm just kind of interested in what new things are in this particular section that you might say were put in or added because there was a strong public interest in adding these new things to the plan.
I think the tree protection and tree canopy were a result of what we've heard in recent history for that. Also, the neighborhood section. We got a lot of feedback that we're focused on Clearwater Beach and downtown, and the neighborhoods aren't getting enough attention, so we created an entire goal section just to cover our neighborhood preservation and planning.
I just have one last one on objective 6.3. Actually, 6.33. Is there any change in that verbiage in there from what's existing?
No, sir.
Okay, so I just wanted, the boundaries didn't change on anything, all the things that have come in front of us as a board, there's no changes as to locations of Beach by Design.
No, sir.
No, and
Just wanted to-
that represents a very original destination resort pool, and there's none left, but we felt we should leave it in here just in case
Transfers.
something
So,
happens.
yeah. Okay. This one. Thank you. I don't have anything. Anybody else? Seeing none?
Right, moving to mobility.
Anything else?
All right, our mobility chapter provides guidance related to improving the performance of our roadway network, increasing travel safety and destination accessibility, promoting walking, biking, and transit use as a safe and convenient alternative to driving, and improving connections to local and regional employment centers. So our goals and objectives and policies from this chapter came from our current transportation element as well as future land use and recreation open space elements. So our first goal covers our city's transportation network, another large objective that covers 15 policies. So this one's going to be maintaining our acceptable transportation network performance while maintaining a multimodal transportation system that improves mobility and safety for all users. Our policies are going to be implementation of a mobility management system to generate funding for our improvements, preserving and protecting our corridors through provisions in the code addressing right-of-way preservation, reviewing right-of-way vacation requests to ensure pedestrian connectivity is not interrupted, that our grid patterns aren't reduced and super blocks aren't created, limiting or consolidating our curb cuts, requiring cross-access easements, and prohibiting new access points for out parcels during our site plan review process. We want to look at creating a transportation management association to implement a transportation demand management program for downtown Clearwater and other locations that have significant fluctuations in their demand due to special events or seasonal impacts. We want to look at implementing a multimodal screening tool to evaluate multimodal elements during our site plan review or our land use and zoning amendment applications. We want to look at impacts of our roadway design on our ability to evacuate populations during emergencies. We want to monitor seasonal change in travel demand and traffic patterns and look at alternatives to address seasonal congestion. We want to look at education and outreach to promote safe travel behavior and increase our awareness of alternative forms of transportation. Look at our effects of micromobility in the city. Look at impacts of prolonged road closures. Look at reestablishing a transportation grid and improve pedestrian connectivity, and complete a comprehensive mobility study throughout the city. Number 2 is looking at the equity of all users. This is a new objective that's been added in to look at equity in our transportation network. So in this, we will consider conducting a needs assessment inventory and assess mobility needs of the city. Ensure development plans provide safe and accessible connections to transit stops. Study and design roadway infrastructure and our transportation network improvements to ensure all users are considered and not disproportionately affected. We want to continue to fund upgrades to sidewalks and right-of-way signage to meet our ADA requirements. We want to look at the creation of an expanded transportation service options to service our traditionally vulnerable populations, and look at strategies to connect our underserved neighborhoods and populations to our trail networks. 3 looks at research, develop, and deployment of technological applications and projects to support things like our connected vehicles, enhanced mobility, and safety. So this will look at utilizing our 5G to expand the city's fiber network for enhanced traffic and parking management. Look at ways to support a connected autonomous vehicles. Look at air taxis and the feasibility of allowing vertiports. Look at standards for aerial and other autonomous delivery methods, and evaluate the implementation of an integrated parking management system and pricing. Number 4 is continuing to plan and implement improvements to our transportation system through that were recommended by our Green Print 2.0. And those include look at improvements to increase the use of transit, walking, and cycling, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by converting the city's vehicle fleet, expanding the publicly accessible electric vehicle charging infrastructure, establishing requirements for EV charging infrastructure for new development and redevelopment, and researching and developing street design standards that aim to maximize efficiency and minimize heat. 5 looks at the safety as number 1 transportation priority and committing to a Vision Zero approach. This looks at our travel safety, and it utilizes the Federal Highway Administration's safe systems elements as part of our transportation planning. We want to identify crash hotspots and assess the feasibility of putting in place safety countermeasures in our improvement projects. We want to look at education and enforcement activities in our identified as crash hotspot areas. We want to focus our improvements on our high injury network roadways. Look at implementing our complete streets and redesigned roadways. Consider a safe routes to school program. Connect more schools and commercial employment areas to our neighborhoods with sidewalks or pathways. Provide access to residential, commercial, and recreational areas by trails and continuous sidewalks between those destinations. And we want to collaborate with our local and regional partners to promote the safe use and enjoyment of the multimodal mobility system. 6 states the city should ensure the code, our community development code should promote travel safety and support multimodal mobility. We want to evaluate our code for opportunities to include and enhance safety measures for vehicle stacking, vehicular and pedestrian connections, circulation, cross-parcel access. We want to review and update our code to address multimodal or new forms of transportation, like our e-bikes, our scooters, our electric vehicles. And we'll look at the feasibility of permitting a low-speed, non-motorized vehicle like a golf cart to operate on city roads. Moving on to goal number 2, this is the expansion of transportation alternatives to lessen dependence on our single occupancy vehicle trips. Objective number 1 is designing future improvements to our transportation corridors to support multimodal mobility, placemaking, land use, and economic development. Under this, we want to establish and implement priority recommendations from Complete Streets for Clearwater implementation plan. We want to look at pilot or quick build projects on roadways to analyze operational effects of complete street techniques. We want to look at establishing complete street design standards in our code. We want to create internal guidelines and policies to assist in determining which roadways we should prioritize for complete streets. We want to improve access, safety, and walkability through improved pedestrian and bicycle connections and enhanced transit. Number 2 is encouraging and incentivizing investments that support increased levels of internal trip capture, reducing vehicle trips and miles traveled, and promoting walking and biking as an alternative to driving. So in this, we want to prioritize our capital investments to support walking, biking, and micro-mobility. We want to adhere to the policies and design guidelines in Beach by Design. We want to update the city's 2006 Shifting Gears Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. We want to promote education and awareness programs to ensure the physical safety of our non-motorized users. We want to use our Parks and Rec master plan to guide development of new and enhanced trail system. We want to prioritize our pedestrian safety along sidewalks and crosswalks. Prioritize the use of the county and city trails as an alternative mode of transportation. We want to look at opportunities to improve the city-owned portion of the Pinellas Trail through downtown to increase usage. And we want to continue to explore options to expand the operational hours of the Pinellas Trail. And lastly, on this one, the city should support development of frequent, high-quality, and reliable transit network. So this one, we're going to look at prioritizing capital investment that supports transit use and improves our transit stop accessibility. We want to actively participate and support transit feasibility and project activities. We want to explore opportunities to promote a more intense walkable and transit-supportive development. We want to continue to explore surface, aerial, and waterborne transit opportunities to increase mobility options. We want to work with developers, PSTA, and other partners to determine best locations for park and ride services. We want to support techniques that allow for the prioritization of high ridership bus routes. And we want to develop curb management solutions to address the impacts of rideshare services. Goal number 3 covers the safe and efficient operation of our Clearwater Air Park. This one is we want to support the long-range planning for maintenance, improvement, and possible expansion of the Clearwater Air Park. Under this, we want to continue to implement the 2020 Airport Master Plan, complete an update to that master plan by 2040, and review any proposed developments to ensure they do not conflict with that master plan. And Goal 4 covers the safe and efficient movement and delivery of goods throughout the city. This is where we want to ensure our delivery service access is considered when planning to serve new development and redevelopment. We want to ensure our code addresses safety and functionality for delivery services. We want to evaluate existing and proposed truck routes to ensure safe and efficient movement of goods while protecting neighborhoods. I want to evaluate potential areas for on-street loading or delivery zones on Clearwater Beach and in downtown. And I will just close this out. But our next steps are, we do still have 2 more public sessions coming up where we will present the full draft plan at June 27th at our North Greenwood Recreation Center and June 29th at Countryside Library. So those are available to the public where we'll present the entire plan. And then beyond that, we will be coming to the Community Development Board. Today we are discussing the first two chapters, and on the 16th we will have the Conservation and Coastal Management, Support Services, and Parks and Public Places chapters. And then the intent is to bring the entire plan before the board on August 15th for public hearing and recommendation to City Council. And then we will have City Council presentations. They will have a similar presentation to what you heard today on June the 5th for the first 2 chapters, and then on June 12th for the remaining 3 chapters. And then we'll have public hearings before City Council as well, with the first one on September 21st and a second on December 7th. And you'll see there's a large gap between those 2 dates because we are required to send the plan to the state for review and comment after first reading by City Council. And so we'll have time to build in any possible comments or changes required by the state before we bring it back to City Council on the 7th. And then lastly, we have our Clearwater 2045 website where all of these chapters are available for anyone to download and view if should they like. And we also have an email up there if anyone would like to send questions for us.
Does anybody have any questions about this particular? I just have a question. I don't know that it really is to be addressed in here. There is some verbiage on it. But when you look at the map of our roadways, let's see if I find the right one here. And it shows our city roads, county roads, and state roads running through the city of Clearwater. We have quite a few roads that are not city roads running through the city of Clearwater.
Yes, sir.
And when those improvements, when it's determined an improvement of some sort is to be done on a state or mostly a county road system, so just curious, and there is some verbiage in here on it, but on the county road, if they were to make an improvement on, I don't know, Sunset Point Road, do they come to our engineering department and discuss the plans and stuff and what they're doing, and we collaborate on this? But it's on their time frame, it's on their schedule, it's on their roadway, they have a name for it, I forget, but their system.
There is some collaboration.
Is there, I know there's been some discussion on certain things, is there any way other than them saying, hey, you want to take the road over and own it, go for it, City of Clearwater, but is there any way of co-opting some of these improvements or doing something? I mean, I know it's all funds, but they retain ownership or, where we see a need for an improvement on a road, do we bring it to them or is it something that we can collaborate on? I mean, I don't know what teeth we have.
When we annex property, we typically take in right-of-way that's in the county, but the major network in the county, we have not done that. When we have talked about getting improvements on certain county roadways, the response was, if you'd like to take it over, you can.
You take it over.
So, I mean, unfortunately, no one's from engineering is here. I don't know how much they actually work with our staff, but I do know, like, when the state has had projects we're involved, there's usually a big steering committee group, and
Right.
you can provide input, through those kind of meetings.
Okay, I know there's been talk on the causeway of adding a separate lane for the turn lane or extending the turn lane for Island Estates to try to alleviate some of the traffic. I don't know where that's ever gone.
Laura Massey playing involvement again, and those conversations are still ongoing as they're looking at the causeway and opportunities to, we're not giving up on multimodal capabilities and opportunities there, so I know that the extended turn lane is still being discussed between our engineering group and the state. Related to the collaboration, yes,
as the EV usage or what you guys are looking at, is there any talk about commercial rental companies coming in and renting out these things? And is there any, maybe talk about how you would regulate that?
We haven't gotten into the specifics of it. I know it's something we've considered. But again, this is just the overarching policy. It will then inform our code decision, which is, of course, the next step once we get the comp plan, is to look at what code amendments we need to do.
Is there any encouragement to say other commercial vehicles being electric instead of fuel, just, for the noise issues and that sort of thing? Or vehicles in general, as far as trying to encourage people to go electric instead of fuel?
I believe we have that in our conservation and coastal management element, or chapter, sorry.
I think that, some of it is focused on what the city directly can control, and then other ways, how do we support those changes by, making sure our policies and regulations help expand the EV charging network and,
Right, exactly.
and things of that nature.
How about the stats on public transportation and the ridership and how it's driven into this planning? Do you have the data on the growth and ridership that affects your long-range plan?
We have limited data that was used as part of this, but most of most of the goals and objectives and policies related to PSD are going to be in plan implementation. They're not going to show up in mobility. So we do have data, and we will have some things related to our relationship with PSTA, but a lot of what is determined for PSTA is dictated by them.
Because you have a lot of that in this, in terms of converting our road network to serve that, but we don't have the data in terms of the growth of ridership to, provide to us to understand why the code is, or your long-range planning is defined as such.
And most of what's in the plan is considering things or evaluating things. It's not necessarily that we're going to do things. We're looking at complete streets. It's not just looking at transit. It's looking at pedestrian and non-motorized vehicles as well. So it's one of the many aspects of what we're going to look at when we're looking at our transportation network. But it is something to consider. But the policy, this is still, again, overarching. We haven't got into the details of things. This will inform future decisions that we make.
Can you provide that information?
We could possibly get it from PSDA.
I would also add, a lot of the transit planning and those conversations do also take place at a countywide level. In the Advantage Pinellas Transportation Planning, the long-range transportation planning efforts, there's a community bus plan component of that. And I think it's okay to say broadly, like, the ridership is strong, but can always be stronger. There's the constant conversation of, without higher frequencies, you don't get higher ridership. So at the countywide level and then somewhat locally, they're looking at investment corridors and things of that nature to initially focus on. And so that would be, how do you build up the density to support the additional ridership, to then support the additional investment in transit. So that's that land use and transportation overlap. So there was some information in the quality places chapter that talked about investment corridors and such. So most of the data on ridership we would have relied on from the long-range transportation planning effort, but we can try to pull it or get you something to point you to it.
I don't know if they're going to work, or they're going to the grocery store, or you're having, everybody deliver everything to everybody now where they're not riding as much. I'm just interested in all that data and how it's compiled in here, because you have elements relative to delivery, delivering by the air now coming up, heliports, things of that nature, and how that all is factored into mobility. I mean, there's a lot of data that is changing every day relative to nobody going out anywhere on a bus to go get something to eat or go to the store because they're coming to you.
Well, I can't speak to PSTA and what their numbers are. I mean, I know there's been news stories that maybe their ridership has dropped some here in the last year or two overall. I can speak to Jolly Trolley, which I'm very familiar with, and we had a very strong month. I think we had 45,000 riders in the month of April alone. So that tourist transportation through Jolly Trolley is as strong as it's ever been. I think the biggest shift I've seen, just from personal observation, and it's anecdotal, but I've heard other folks talk about it too, is the electric bicycles. A lot of people are bicycling, older folks who would never have pedaled up the Causeway Bridge, but you see so many more of those, and I see so many employees of beach businesses out there riding to and from work, particularly restaurants, and those are electric bicycles. So I think that part of this is to accommodate that trend, which has just happened in the last year or two, just to allow some adaptability and flexibility to accommodate those.
And as far as expanding the trails, the congestion because of the electric vehicles now it's becoming, now you've got pedestrians, you've got bicycles, and now you have all these electric vehicles. Is there any talk about how you guys are going to kind of regulate that or try to, or make, because other than just making the trail wider, I mean, that's pretty much all you've got.
Right, we haven't gotten into specifics of that, but it is one of the policies in here that we need to make sure that we're considering that.
And that was what, sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying, I'm piggybacking on his question was looking at and coordinating with the various law enforcement, whether it's on-duty officers or volunteer officers that are going to be monitoring these trails, because a lot of people don't, in certain areas of the trails that go from Gulf to Bay south down, I forget, Morningside neighborhood and areas like that that are in the FPL Duke Energy easement, there's a lot of empty, odd areas in there where a lot of people are apprehensive on using that trail. The trail goes underneath at one point US 19. I'm not real hip on going underneath US 19, you know, to get on the trail. So because that's gonna be their budget then too, is if we're promoting more use of these trails and sidewalks, you're gonna need more people to make sure that the people that are on your trails, that A, they're lit in, you know, decent areas and they're safe at the same time, I would think.
Okay, I would say that there's an expanded conversation now about how our trails, not necessarily the city, I'm gonna come at everything probably from a countywide perspective when it comes to this. How our trails are really to function, because they were primarily recreational. But, you know, some of the objectives is for them to serve as that alternate for mobility purposes. But to your point, without lighting, and if they close at sunset, they don't really provide a viable opportunity for that. So I know that those conversations are taking place as it relates to the Pinellas Trail, and I would assume also the Duke, because it's now considered just one nice loop.
Correct.
But those are good points that, you know, from a coordination perspective, or just to touch on it from a policy, like a local goal, or not goal necessarily, but locally, if we want to make sure that we're expanding those mobility options through our trails, these are some of the things that we may want to specifically call out or highlight in the policy. So thank you for that.
But I was involved in the construction of K-Pop Wetlands Park, and that's one of the ones that ties into your east-west trail. So when you go through K-Pop, you do have the opportunity to go on the east-west trail. That takes you there to go over McMullen Booth, and it goes behind the ball fields. And there, when I used to walk around all the time, there is definitely a very dark area during the daytime that you're going through, and you're kind of sprinting that one uphill, because you don't know where you're at in there. It's very dense and until you get to the ball fields. So it's just like those little pockets that can get a little dicey.
Anybody else? I thank you so much to you and the whole staff. This is obviously a heck of a lot of work. Thank you for giving us the time to review it too. And if there's nothing else, we'll see you next week or shortly.
Yes, I think it'll be a long meeting.
Yeah.
So, bring us some.
Bring something.
Bring snacks. This meeting's adjourned 2:13.